I have two guests with me today, Charlotte Ellery and Geniene Mayrata. They are co-founders of a company called Well-Built Mind. They work with organisations, families and individuals so that we might learn how to understand and manage our emotions, deal with the ups and downs of daily life and handle life's challenges. They do this from a very interesting perspective, by helping us understand some of the chemicals in our brain and how we respond to these under different situations. There is a science behind how we're feeling. Charlotte and Geniene can help us through this, giving us understanding and tools to manage feelings or situations. This sounds fascinating. Let's find out more. Charlotte and Geniene, thanks for being with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Peter.
Let's jump straight into it. Emotional intelligence, what is it?
Oh, wow. So the first step I would say is emotional awareness. So actually being aware of what emotion you're feeling in any given moment. And that would be the foundational block. And I'd say a lot of people do struggle with that. They have sensations and feelings that they're not necessarily aware of that are kind of going on in the background and really impacting what they say and how they behave. So that would be our first step, would be awareness. And then, of course, there's the bridge between the state that we find ourselves in and the state that we would like to be in to perform at our best. So it's self-awareness and then being able to manage our emotions to help us enter a state that's optimum for the task.
And that's exactly what our training delivers, and what we hope to leave every participant is that sense of a greater awareness so that they can read and understand their own experience and urge to behave in a certain way. And then that moment of awareness gives them the choice to actually act in possibly a more functional way that's going to create greater joy and fulfillment and connection.
So the awareness is realising that awareness of how you feel, and the intelligence side of emotional intelligence is then perhaps responding to that and choosing your response and dealing with it. Is that a fair way to put it?
And even from a physiological and biological sense, a lot of our urges come from our limbic system, which is in the middle of our brain. Right. And when we switch on our more intelligent human part of our brain, it's our prefrontal cortex, and then we are able to respond not from our old brain, not from the reptilian or limbic, but rather from a really human driven, wiser part of our brain. So, you smack on with the intelligence part there.
Right. Now, when I did the little intro just then, I sort of alluded to the various chemicals and the hormones in our brain that I guess result or elicit certain responses and everything. What are those chemical compounds in our brain, and what do they do?
Well, the four that we focus on, there are lots. We focused on the four that are the most important. Cortisol, chemical of stress; oxytocin, chemical of connection; dopamine, focus and drive, motivation; and serotonin, feelings of competence and capability.
So they're the four big ones, and and
we think they fundamentally drive
how we feel and how we react. I really want to delve into those in more detail in a few minutes. Now, you're the founders of Well-Built Mind. Now, that's a wellbeing training and consulting company. Now, we've just gained, a quick understanding of a few basics with emotional intelligence and the basic brain chemical compounds. Can you tell me more about Well-Built Minds and what you do and how you sort of bring all this stuff together?
We have three arms, I would say, to the business. So we work with organisations, businesses, companies doing emotionally intelligent leadership, psychosocial hazard management, and then we work with schools. We do quite a lot with schools, again, looking at the leadership practices within the schools, but also teaching kids about their brain chemicals. And then we also work with families. So we do parent workshops and smaller family workshops.
How do kids respond to an understanding that their impulsiveness or something, or how they're feeling, whether they're scared or they want to run away or they want to punch someone in the nose. What sort of a revelation is that for kids when they have that level of understanding? Because I never had that. I just thought I was a rat bag.
That's wonderful seeing that.
It's so they have little mini revelations because they feel understood. It all makes sense to them. It's actually beautiful when we do the family workshops.
I had my son when he was 4 years old, and I'd have to say he was a big inspiration for this work when he was a crazy 2-year-old with brain chemistry going all over the place. We were at the school playground, and it was after school, so all his friends had left, and there were a few girls there who were a year older than him, and I could see he was wanting to join in and play with them. And they were kind of ignoring him and sort of, sending messages they didn't want to play with him. And he kept trying, and they didn't realise I was watching all this. And eventually they were standing on a slide and they looked down at my son and they said, "We don't want to play with you because you're ugly." And immediately my son, who'd been learning this since before he could talk, stood up, he stuck his chest out and he said, "My serotonin belongs to me." And he turned around and marched off. And I went, oh, my goodness, he just picked it. He could see that those kids were trying to drop his serotonin, make him feel lower status, and he was not having any of it.
I love that. I love that. So what is it that you do with the school kids and the families and the organisations and individuals and everything?
Yeah, well, we walk them through a 4-part framework, and we deliver this pitch to the participants. So when it's to the children, we try to engage them in ways that are a little more fun and practical and lighter stories, things that they can relate to. But we just walk them through the 4-part framework, which covers the 4 chemicals, and it's a sort of an interesting workshop full of different activities and stories and ways of understanding and embodying, because a lot of this is actually a felt sense. We want them to learn by feeling, and we believe that's the key to taking away something that's very real and something that they can start to integrate.
So it's a bit of an experiential process,
exactly.
Is it? Okay.
We'll often get people up on stage and we blow up balloons and pop balloons and get them to realise and feel what's going on inside their body, like maybe a raised heart rate, or maybe they hold their breath. Or,
so if they're going into fight, flight, freeze, we will try to induce a slight rate of that, and then we'll do a meditation to calm. And if we're trying to increase someone's dopamine, we'll get them up doing hacky sacks and table throwing, ping pong balls, bouncing balls, because all of a sudden you're focused and motivated and you can feel that rush of dopamine. So they go, aha, this is what dopamine feels like. And as soon as you develop that awareness, it makes it much more real and far more engaging.
Look, I'm dying to get in and talk about those chemicals, but before we do that, how did you get into this sort of business and this sort of game? What are your backgrounds? Geniene, what's your background?
I was doing originally, first and foremost, I'm a mum to my 3 amazing children who are grown now.
Yes.
And that's been my biggest, most wonderful job. When I was sort of through my 20s, I was working at the Pilbara division of general practice, which was great. And that's when I was doing health promotion work, and we had been travelling, and I sort of felt then that was an amazing role. But with sort of health promotion work, you were really promoting health messages without understanding or it was quite impersonal, actually. That's how I felt about it. I thought, no, I need to be much more working with the families in seeing. I feel like sometimes people understand the messages without really knowing the reason why and how to then make healthier choices.
Yeah.
So this really aligns with people having the option to move towards healthier choices. So then I started counselling to sort of better understand people, which led me to jumping on board with Charlotte, doing the work we do now. So Charlotte was really the driver of this when we met years ago and was learning about it, and you can share this now. And I felt so inspired, and it just completely aligned. Our life missions aligned, didn't they, Charlotte?
Yeah. The synergy is quite special. So I was a teacher way back, and then I ended up doing my master's in education, and I did a master's in research, educational research, and I was looking at the relationship between teacher stress levels and student stress levels, and essentially how those two impact each other. And that's when I discovered cortisol. I was also looking at the brain chemistry of kids with ADHD, and I discovered these words like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and all these. And I kind of went, oh, wow, this is incredible. And I remember I was actually sitting on my backyard veranda with my kids running around, and I came across a book about brain chemicals, and I thought I've got to get this book. So I ordered it online, and then I went, no, I've got to read it right now. So then I also bought the downloadable version and started reading it. And I was reading like serotonin, needing to feel confident and capable, and sometimes dominant, and sometimes the alpha. And I'm looking at my son going, he's doing it right now. He's doing it. And it's just, it's really changed what I see when I look people in the eye, because it's you go, oh, you're trying to get this one, or you're trying to avoid that one, and I think
that's
also the understanding and compassion that I'm now able to give myself when I do crazy, stupid things that I later regret. I go, oh, that's what was going on,
and understanding another's behaviour and taking it on less personally, understanding what they're seeking. So I think it would. The understanding of this, we just see the world would be a much happier and more compassionate place if this was a foundational thing taught in schools, which it could be. It would definitely make the experience and journey much easier for everybody.
So you had all of that involvement. Charlotte, how many kids do you have?
I have 2.
So you've got 2 case studies on board 24/7, is that right?
Something like that, yeah.
Now, I guess you've come together, and what prompted you both to turn it into a successful business?
We just started sharing it, I think.
Just the pure motivation to share it with others, because we found it so helpful in our own lives.
Yeah. I mean, originally it was all for free at the kids' school, and people just responded and said, wow, this is very helpful.
So you saw the need, and it was sort of organic from there by the sound of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we just started talking about it, couldn't stop talking about it, and then it turned into workshops.
Yeah. So we're very blessed, Peter, because it really aligns with what we're passionate about.
How long has Well-Built Minds been going?
Well, it's sort of been about 5 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
3 years Well-Built Mind, or is it a little longer? Or before that, we were the Discipline of Bliss.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're doing a lot of sister circles and women's workshops.
Yeah. And we became Well-Built Mind because we still are hippie at heart.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
We did find. So I also teach in prisons, and I was teaching this in the men's prison, and it was going really well because it was a way for men to talk about their emotions that was a lot less fluffy. And if they could say, okay, there's this compound, and when it's up, it has this impact. When it's down, it has this impact on behaviour. It was almost like building blocks that they could work with. So I think we realised, hang on, this isn't just for sister circles. This is actually a lot about men's well-being. So we got involved in the mining sector, working with Rio Tinto and building companies. And it goes really well with masculine men who don't want to talk about their feelings.
Because it gives them the language and the framework to communicate.
Yeah. I can understand that. So, all right, this is really interesting. Let's start talking about these brain chemicals, or neurotransmitters as they're called. Now, can we start with cortisol? Now, you describe it as the chemical of stress. Tell us more about what triggers the effects and the understanding of our physical and mental responses to cortisol. Tell me all about it.
Well, I'll start. So this is when I was at uni. So Jay was 2, and I was just learning about fight, flight, freeze. And
so say that again slowly. Fight,
flight, freeze.
Or freeze.
Yeah. There is also fawn, but we generally focus on fight, flight, and freeze. And essentially, we all have all 3, but some people have a stronger fight or flight. So I was walking down a curved road, and there was a big wall, and there was very little room for pedestrians, and it was fairly quiet, and I was holding my son's hand. And then, sure enough, a car comes flying around the corner. So in that moment of stress, my instinct was to flight. I couldn't get away because there was a wall right behind. So I stepped back and I went and held my breath.
Mm.
Yeah. And in the same moment, my 2-year-old son reaction was to step forward and punch the car as the car went past.
Really?
I looked down.
So that was a fight response.
Yes.
Yes.
And I was like, what was that? That is not learnt behaviour. That's another instinct.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about how that translates into workplace behaviours?
Yeah, so what we try to leave our participants is an understanding of when they feel that urge in their body, and that's why we get them to experience a rise in their cortisol in the space so that they can feel it, because it presents differently for different.
So how does that feel?
In your body, it will be increased heart rate or shoulders up, or your senses may vary in some way. You may sort of get tingling. You may feel a little bit sweaty or shaky. So there's about 15 physiological symptoms that we as mammals experience when our amygdala senses danger, and that cues our pituitary to release cortisol. And as soon as cortisol, and this happens in a split second, less than, and as soon as that is circulating through our body, we will have these very strong physiological urges to respond. So as what we really try to translate for people to do is to have that awareness. That's just cortisol. This is really normal. It's okay. All is well. And then we give very actionable science-based strategies to calm our nervous system and switch on our vagus nerve, which calms us down. We've got this incredible system inbuilt in our body to counteract cortisol. And I think even just understanding that has people feel a lot more control and autonomy in their own lives. Like, okay, if my cortisol starts to run, I can bring it back and take back control. Because if you don't, people end up in big trouble. They say things they regret, or they may completely freeze and say not communicate something that is really important to communicate. So allowing people to move courageously toward challenges and know they've got the capacity to cope and take back a sense of calm and confidence.
So I guess as an example, if I'm out on a social event or something like that and an emergency happens in front of me and whatever, a car accident or something like that, I guess that would cause a rise in cortisol and some stress of, what should I do? Should I go in there and help, or should I just get out of here because this isn't my business, or I just stand there and I don't know what to do. Is that right? Is that the kind of responses? Or?
That's the acute response.
That would be.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also chronic.
That's right. Exactly. At a day-to-day level, you may just be driving to work and a car cuts you off, your time pressure, you're running late. So you're getting all these little squirts of cortisol in your brain from very small things in your environment. It may be that the phone rings and, you have a slightly difficult conversation with someone as you're driving, and it just continues to build up. Then you want to snap, but nothing has actually really happened. So that's the level that we're coming in at.
So it's that build up and the straw that breaks the camel's back of whatever response that might be. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
And it's also if you have a challenge, for example, if we're talking to school students or people in the workplace and they have to do a workplace presentation or stand up in front of all of their peers and present something, and the sheer panic of having to do something like that is almost an unreasonable response to what is expected of them, and just allowing them to move more freely to those experiences and feel really good and wire pathways of courage rather than avoidance.
So there's good stress and bad stress, but if we have bad stress from, I guess what you're saying is that build-up of cortisol, is that right? And that constant, that constant level of negative stress. How can we reduce our cortisol and deal with that?
Wow.
Yeah, lots of ways.
Geniene and I like to hug each other quite a lot. We give people a whole toolkit of strategies. Exercise being Bracco's research says exercise is the number one stress reduction tool that we have, 30 minutes a day, 6 days a week. But it doesn't have to be 30 minutes in a row. It can be 3 10-minute blocks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Does it have to be intensive or just can be a walk or
anything that
a bit of gardening or something like that?
Yeah. And just shaking it helps if you're in a space where you can't actively really release cortisol.
Yeah.
You can just subtly shake it out, even just get it out of your system.
And breathing as well.
Yeah, we have a little acronym, especially we developed this for the kids just so that they could walk away and know that if they ever feel cortisol, they can just give themselves a helping hand. So hand to heart is really giving ourselves compassion for the moment and awareness. Okay, all is well, just starting to calm the nervous system. And then acknowledge that cortisol has been triggered, and name the emotion. The science shows, or the evidence shows, that if you can actually name your experience and name the emotion, so it may be if you've gone into fight, you're feeling quite angry and agitated and frustrated and feeling really aggressive in some way, or flight, you may be feeling anxious or scared, freeze, you're feeling really shut down. But if you're able to actually name the emotion, you're switching on the other part of your brain, the wise part, so it can actually reduce the intensity of the strong emotion by up to 50% purely by naming and switching on that part of your brain.
So that's the awareness and the intelligence that comes back to,
and then
that.
Deep breaths. And so we can encourage people still with the helping hand, like to come into their 5 senses, to take 5 breaths to just simply start, maybe a 5-finger mantra or some things that they feel like they need. I am calm, I am confident, I am compassionate. Just actually redirecting the focus in your brain just calms everything down, and then you're able to respond rather than react.
Can you be in a situation where you don't have enough cortisol or it's too low?
Yes.
And something happens and you go, whatever.
You're possibly talking about dopamine there, which we'll come to later. But we do need cortisol for all sorts of physiological functions in our body. So we don't inhale if we don't have enough cortisol. So
yeah. But one of the main reasons why it's so important to get a sense of control over the cortisol in our lives is if we don't, our bodies, when cortisol is chronically released at a high level, our immune system shuts down. So we have, and our heart works extra, above and beyond its capacity. So we have a lot of illness. And so that's another reason why we want people to understand that there's good stress and there's bad stress, but you don't want to live with that chronic everyday,
So it's a very necessary component of our makeup.
Yes, but we have to have we use a cortisol thermometer, sort of get my mouth around that, just to sort of visualise where you...
That's a good analogy. Geniene and Charlotte, I'm loving the way you take something that's so complex and make it more simple. And that's not by dumbing it down, but just making it relatable so that we understand how it impacts us as individuals. I really want to explore the other neurotransmitters in a few moments. I'm talking today with Charlotte and Geniene, founders and principals of a wellbeing training and consultancy called Well Built Mind. Before the break, we talked about cortisol. Now, can we shift to oxytocin? Now, what does it do and how does it affect us?
Okay, so it's released by our pituitary gland, same place that cortisol
which is sort of right in the middle of the bottom of the brain, is that right?
Yes, yep. And we have cortisol receptors all through our body, all through our muscles, but over half of our oxytocin receptors are in one muscle, and that muscle is our heart.
I was just going to guess that. You beat me to it.
Yes. Yeah. So when our oxytocin levels are high, we feel loved, we feel loving, we feel kind, we feel compassionate, we feel a sense of wanting to care for the people around us, and it helps us have empathy. So, for example, right now I'm kind of sitting here in my own body having my own experience, but because of oxytocin, I'm able to look at yourself, Peter, and I kind of look at those facial expressions and I look at your body language, and I can actually get a sense of how you might be feeling in this moment. So if you came in and, if your brows were furrowed and your shoulders were down, quite quickly I'd probably get a sense of perhaps distress within my own nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, if you came in, shoulders back, smiling, having those types of facial expressions and body language, I would immediately get a sense of happiness inside my own nervous system. So essentially it's connecting
So
us.
it rubs off.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So joy is contagious.
Yeah, yeah. And you say oxytocin sort of sources from the heart, so love really does come from the heart.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And its own reward. So when we do things that are kind for another human being that helps someone else's oxytocin go up,
Mm-hmm.
we get oxytocin ourselves.
Right.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there is something in, if you feel good, you make others around you feel good.
Yeah. 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 So in terms of how do we teach this in workplaces, we talk a lot about team morale. And that
Mhm.
sense of good team spirit, and that sense that you are working with people and you have a sense that they've got your back
Mm.
and you're working together as a team towards a common goal.
Yeah.
And so it is really important chemical for people to experience both at home but also at work.
Yeah, feeling safe and like they belong in the workplace. And oxytocin is a big healer for cortisol also. So showing people that, just engaging with their peer, if you see they're struggling, will drop their cortisol, increase their oxytocin, and the ripple effect of that is felt across, So not being afraid to check in with others and engaging them to lift the spirit of the overall community.
So they can work to balance each other out and things like that.
And
Is
it's
that
not
right?
even about stepping in and fixing everyone's problem. It's not about that. It's actually about just showing human connection and saying, hey, we'll figure this out together. You're not alone. Just all
Empathy.
Yeah. And it's hugely healing for our nervous systems.
So how can we release oxytocin? How do we let it flow?
Give you a big hug. But no one say that. Lots of hugs. Make sure you
Right.
8 hugs a day.
so sort of positive physical contact.
Physical
Yes.
contact.
With people that you feel safe with. Of course, if you hug someone and they don't want to be hugged, they are not going to get oxytocin.
Well,
they are going to get cortisol.
That's when the cortisol
Yes.
goes up. Is that right? Okay.
So of course it's with people that we feel safe with, and some people aren't huggers, and that's totally fine. They can pat their dog, or taking care of other people and things. So looking after animals, looking after elderly people, looking after plants, any kind of act of altruism where we're doing something for the well-being of somebody else, we get oxytocin from that.
Yeah.
Sharing food is a good one.
Eye contact, using someone's name, active listening, being curious, not making it all about yourself, actually tuning into the other person.
Yeah. And essentially, when we come to work, we don't have to be cogs in a machine. Yeah, we can be real human beings that do actually care about the humanity of each other. And there's a lot of research showing that people who are happy at work are more productive at work.
What does it feel like when our oxytocin is low? Do you feel flat?
Well, just a sense of loneliness and a sense of not feeling like you belong, that you don't have a tribe. And so it can actually, so the three, so we've spoken about cortisol, so that we want to keep down, and the others we all want to keep higher, because if they dip down, our cortisol goes up.
Right.
So when we feel low oxytocin, we'll often see, our brain will see that as a survival threat, because from its limbic system, it doesn't feel like we belong. So we could be, we may not survive if you don't belong to a tribe. So it can feel horrible. It can feel really horrible. Not only can it feel lonely, it can actually induce a state of anxiety and, possibly other strong emotions. So, again, really key to tuning in and taking some steps to actively increase in your own oxytocin. And it doesn't have to be by big things. It can even be by engaging at the local shopping centre when you go in there and you get buying your super, your groceries, just engage in conversation and just feeling, just taking small micro moments to connect with your community. That can, even little things like that will really boost you up and have you feel, a greater sense of calm.
When my beautiful Nan passed when she was 93 years old, that was one of the most intense oxytocin roller coasters I've had, and I very much felt that the cracking in the heart sensation. And it was really interesting just allowing, because none of this is about suppressing our emotions. It's all about allowing our emotions to be, but then the leaning into loving support that came in the days and weeks after that. Like me and Danny, we took a couple of days off school and work, and we just spent time together. So my daughter, and spent time with family and shared food and made cakes for each other. And it was that sense of, wow, so we're going through this grief process. So inevitably our oxytocin is going to drop.
You just mentioned there, the roller coaster ride that was your Nan's passing, but the physical impact is, you talked about a breaking. You felt a breaking in your heart.
It was very physical.
Tell me more about that. Was that a physical feeling?
Yeah. It was.
I don't know that I've ever felt that. So tell me,
Peter. So it was actually 3:00 in the morning. And I was in my Nan's bedroom, and she had passed, and I was with her. Yeah. And I, when I touched her, and I knew that she wasn't there, and just, it was like lightning just split my heart in half. It was very physical, very sharp, and then quite a spiritual moment for me happened. I just dropped to my knees and kind of howled up to the sky, and the feeling that came through, the sense of closeness to my Nan, which I felt so loved, but the sense of loss that I wouldn't get to hug her anymore and share food with her anymore. It was the sensation.
So was that a rush of oxytocin, or it dropped out of you?
That was, my oxytocin receptors in my heart were like begging for the oxytocin, and I knew it wasn't going to come in the same way as it had in the past.
Right, okay.
So I was used to hugging my Nan, getting oxytocin, and my heart feels full. And now I touched her and she felt cold, and it was like, whoa, I'm not going to get oxytocin there anymore. So it was that sense of...
Not from that physical.
In that
physical way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very physical sensation.
Yeah. But we heal, and I work in grief support as well, and talk a lot about healing from heartache and loss, and that's one of the beautiful things that comes following a loss, is that reconnecting with those that have gone in other ways, and we're forever entwined with them, and it's just, grief is the process of that, slowly finding other ways to reconnect and honour that life and love and the impact of that person. And so I believe, and I have felt from my own experience from losing my parents that, the oxytocin pathways, you build new ones, but they're not in the physical. I've really felt that, which is interesting, because I don't even know what the science is around that, but that's my experience. I feel like I still get oxytocin from my parents, but they're no longer on earth. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. Just the thought process brings on the oxytocin.
And actually, the science does show that our thoughts induce these chemicals. So it is that.
Yeah. I can get that. So that's oxytocin, and we've talked a bit about cortisol. We could talk all day.
We could.
Couldn't we? So let's go on to dopamine. What's that?
Dopamine is our chemical of drive, and so when dopamine is flowing, we feel really focused, motivated. We feel a great sense of desire and direction. So it's like we want something, we're going for it, and so it's a good feeling that, it's a good feeling to have high dopamine.
It's getting the job done, is it?
Yes. It is. Yeah. So it's, when you feel really motivated and driven, it's just all of a sudden you have an abundance almost of energy to keep going. So it's just what we really try to show people is, and have them experience in our workshops, is that dopamine is a real gift, but you also have to be very careful where you source your dopamine from, because some of the things in our modern day world will actually deplete and have us experience a dopamine deficiency, which we need to just be very aware of, because if we have a dopamine deficiency, we have the exact opposite of high dopamine, which is really horrible. You know, the world seems more grey. It's harder you have to work much harder to get a sense of energy and move towards a goal.
When you talk about things in our modern society, would they be illicit drugs? Or not even illicit drugs, some of our more legal drugs.
Yeah, those sorts of things. But even, you know, social media, gaming, anything that gives you instant gratification, which our world is full of.
Yes.
It's essentially giving you dopamine too quickly.
Yeah, it overstimulates our reward system, which has evolved from caveman days. So they didn't have, iPhones growing on trees, and they didn't have McDonald's in the cave next door. So if you think of it like that, you just kind of want to sort of balance so that you will have longer term goals that you're working toward. So maybe learning to play an instrument, maybe having other things where you exercise is a great one as well, because you sort of, you're out there. That's quite an instant way of getting dopamine as well. So
just from my understanding, what you're saying there is some of this instant gratification stuff, the gaming, the social media, and, all the trimmings that a lot of our young people have today, create a situation of too much dopamine, and then you get desensitized to it. Is that what happens?
Yeah.
So
you have to work much harder to then get your dopamine to then, or basically normal life seems very boring following that kind of experience of being on a PlayStation, or having a sweet, all of a sudden the apple tastes really plain. It's just that kind of sense. So you just got to be really careful, and so that's what it's about, having balance in life. And
all addictions are dopamine addictions. If anyone's ever addicted to anything, it's actually dopamine that they're addicted to. So it's quite interesting teaching this in prisons, because helping people understand that our dopamine is such a powerful force and we can use it for good. And if we can get our dopamine and our oxytocin in mind, essentially if we have goals in our heart, and then we bring the power of our dopamine to lead us towards the goals of our heart, we're unstoppable. But our dopamine can so easily be hijacked by things like gaming and advertising and all these things. So knowing what's triggering our dopamine is really important.
So there's sort of an unhealthy level, or how would I put it, consistent level of dopamine. It fluctuates naturally, and that's not a bad thing. But having too much all the time desensitizes you. So how do we feel when our dopamine is low? Just like
bored, lazy, apathy, can't be bothered. What's the point? I don't want to do it. This sucks.
So then following that, we've got some really great little things that you can do in the moment just to sort of inject some dopamine, and get going. And they're the fun things that you can actually do that we get the kids in.
So there's healthy ways to release dopamine. Is that right?
Yes, override.
How do we do that?
Yeah.
Water is one. Get enough sleep.
That's a bit easy.
Play throw catch. Oh, they're very easy.
And hand-eye coordination type things.
Yeah.
So getting out,
brisk goal-orientated walk.
Throughout, doing some hoops or table tennis, hacky sacks.
Play some frisbee or something.
Getting really clear on your goals. So visualising your goals, having to-do lists. Just directing your attention.
And watching your self-talk. If your limbic system won't release dopamine if it doesn't believe the goal is achievable. So break it into achievable steps. Say to yourself, I can do this, I've got this, I'm going to, do this, then I'm going to do this, write a to-do list, tick it off as you go, and you're just going to, our own best spark plug, I think we said once. It's literally like that. So we just inject little bursts of dopamine to keep us going.
That's very interesting. I just want to pick up on a point there where you talked about having goals that are achievable and that will help the release of dopamine. Whereas if you make plans and have all these, goals that are unachievable and then you can't get there, your body won't release that dopamine. Is that right?
That's right. Have you had that sense before? Like if you've been given a goal?
I know a few people that have got that sense and they do all the planning in the world and everything like that, and you just think, that's not going to happen because, they're not ready to do that. Whereas if they set some gradual goals, they've got to be some steps leading up to it rather than this.
And once you get going, Peter, it becomes easier because you start getting that sense of reward coming back at the feedback. There. So,
and great to have like 10-year goals, 5-year goals, but our brain is not really going to release dopamine for those types of goals. So yes, keep those in your prefrontal cortex, but for today, give yourself a list of what to do today.
I often use the analogy with my kids of eating the pizza one slice at a time because if you shove the whole pizza in your mouth, you're going to choke and you'll be in trouble. But if you want to eat the whole pizza, eat it one slice and one mouthful at a time, and you'll get there.
Yes.
Is that an analogy?
Break it down. It is an analogy. Focus on the slice of pizza in front of you, not the whole pizza.
Yeah.
Love it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's the other thing about dopamine is that our ending kind of, what we want them to walk away with is really the joy is in the journey, not the destination. So not to always wait off for some far off thing that's going to make us happy either. Really enjoying the journey of life.
Because as soon as you get
the bites of pizza,
because as soon as you get to your goal, dopamine will tell you, there's more.
There's more.
Get a new goal.
Right. The next one, the next iPhone, the next car, the next promotion,
100,000 Insta followers. Your dopamine will never be satisfied. I was going to choose that song, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. If dopamine could write a song, that's the song it would write.
It's insatiable.
So is that the dark side of dopamine, or is there another dark side?
Well, it's the addiction and watching that. Yeah. And that as well. So it's about living with a much more mindful existence, living with purpose and presence in the moment.
Very, very interesting. Let's talk about serotonin.
Serotonin, wow. So released in our pineal gland, about 80 to 90% of our serotonin is in our guts, in our gastrointestinal tract.
Right.
So it's kind of cool how it's released. So superhighway from the back of our eyeballs to our pineal gland. So serotonin is made up from tryptophan and melatonin. It's just two chemicals that come together. And when we open our eyes in the morning, the message goes to the pineal gland to start producing the stuff, and it simply puts the melatonin we got while we were asleep together with the tryptophan to make serotonin. So if that process goes well, we will feel confident, capable, we'll have good self-esteem, we'll have a sense that we can face life's challenges, we'll have a sense that if we need to be a leader, we can be. So it's a sense of feeling capable, and it's like I've got a strong backbone. That's how I feel it in my body. Generally, our posture will improve when our serotonin is up. So really good for everyone to have good levels of serotonin. Of course, as you probably know by now, Peter.
So that makes you feel good and confident.
Yes.
And have sort of you value yourself.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, resilient.
Self-worth.
Good self-worth. I mean, when it goes through the roof, if you think of, have you ever won a grand final, Peter?
Yeah, well, I guess a sporting grand final, but I've won a few other things in competition. Yes.
Okay. Did you have the urge to raise your fist to the sky?
An absolute rush.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes we get a huge rush of serotonin, and we generally make ourselves big and kind of smile and do those alpha type of things. So that's wonderful, and they're peak moments. But then it's also we want a solid baseline of serotonin so that each day we have a feeling of good self-esteem. Yeah. So that's what we want for everyone that comes to our workshops, and we give them a whole stack of tools. Because serotonin does sometimes drop, and it is inevitable for all of us that sometimes our serotonin levels will go down, and it feels pretty awful when it goes down. We feel it in our guts. Yeah. We can feel shaky.
Again, it feels like a survival threat.
Yeah. Yeah. We lack confidence. We don't quite know what to do. And it's not, our self-esteem drops, our confidence drops, and
we doubt ourselves.
Yeah, we don't trust our own thoughts and our own perspective, and it's not a good way to live.
So how can we release serotonin? How can we manage that within ourselves?
Well, so getting enough tryptophan in our diet is one thing, getting enough sleep so we have enough melatonin. Sunlight, actually, is probably my favourite way to get serotonin, is making sure we get enough sunlight. Again, superhighway from our language centre on the left to our pineal gland.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're saying things to ourselves such as, oh, this is going to be terrible, I'm going to stuff up, I'm so nervous about coming to do this radio show with Peter because I'm just going to say the wrong thing, it's going to be awful, everyone's going to laugh at me. And if I say those types of thoughts, my serotonin will decrease quite rapidly. So I can instead think things to myself like, this will be good, it's going to go well, I'm going to speak clearly, I'll be okay. Peter's a good bloke, he's not going to embarrass me. If I think those types,
we hope.
Not yet anyway. Yeah.
If we think those types of positive thoughts, then our serotonin levels start to pick up.
So how your thinking then impacts your serotonin, plus or minus, into how you then feel and the physical effects on your body. So if you're feeling positive and confident and want to have a crack at something, your serotonin will come up.
Yes.
But if you're there and go, well, no, why am I doing this? Everyone's watching. Sally told me that I'm no good at this, so I won't be any good, and it'll drop. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
And our posture will reflect both stances as well. So if we feel really not capable of something, we tend to close in, and literally our posture when our serotonin drops closes in. So what we teach people and practice ourselves is if we want to embody confidence, literally shoulders back, head up.
It's the old walk tall, like Grandma used to say.
Chin up, shoulders back, Actually that cues our pineal gland to release serotonin, and within a couple of minutes we'll feel stronger and more capable to carry through with what we need to do. And so we teach this a lot with people in the workplace and people, kids at school when they're feeling really a real sense of feeling embarrassed that they don't really just feeling like they are not seen, just actually shoulders back, and they'll actually start to feel, it's almost like fake it till you make it, but actually fake it till you are it. That's what happens. Because you just start to feel more yourself and more settled, and so you can go about your day and what you need to do with just so much greater joy.
And so all of these chemicals, these hormones, sort of work and flow all over the place, and how do they sort of interact with each other? You
it's like a cauldron.
Getting that right balance. What is there a right balance, or does it vary for everybody? Or
I would say there are optimal states for various situations. Yeah. So we talk a lot about calm alert, so that being our cortisol is down, but our dopamine is up. So we're very focused and productive. There's various different recipes that we want for different activities, and that's what I would say real emotional intelligence is being able to go, this is the state I want to be in for this, so I can be my best, be at my natural best for this, and then being able to bring myself into that state.
Because I could imagine that if you were about to drive a race car, you'd want to have a certain mix of those chemicals versus, as you were saying before, Geniene, give a public speech or a presentation, which some people say they would rather, die than give a public speech. Versus, dealing with a highly emotional thing, like you were saying, Charlotte, with the passing of your nan. There'd be different mix for different recipe for different situations.
Exactly.
And I think good leaders, I know good leaders are people who are able to get their cortisol level down, so they're not stressed, but they're highly driven, have very clear goals. They're emotionally connected to the people in their team, and the people in their team feel supported by their leader, and then they have good levels of serotonin. So they have a sense of confidence. This is where we're going together. And people who are able to do that are magnetically leaders. That's incredible to be around.
Yeah.
Others pick up on it.
Yeah, you can feel it.
What we were saying before, yeah.
And there's that sense of trust, and I want to be on the mission with this person.
What's the opposite? Just how many people do we see in organisations like that they just bring a group and a team down with them? Is that common? You see much of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's being a leader is tough, and the emotional intelligence that is required of leaders now more than ever is so high. So being able to have difficult conversations, being able to give constructive criticism to people in the team in a way that doesn't drop their serotonin levels, that's quite advanced.
Is that possible?
Yes, that is possible. That is absolutely. That's what we teach leaders how to do.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we do a lot around.
That's a very good thing.
Managing people is always going to involve emotions and how to, as a leader, how to have your nervous system in a particular state and then support the people in your team. That's workplace wellbeing. That's what's coming in now with the psychosocial hazard management, is that managers are being expected to do that more and more.
You've brought that one up. We're back with Charlotte and Geniene talking brain chemicals, neurotransmitters, emotions, feelings, and how we manage these. You can help us better understand our brain chemistry, how it changes, how it affects our emotions and responses. Now, what benefits can this understanding provide, I guess, say, kids at school or people in the workplace, families? How does it help?
The bullying work that we do, I think, is quite amazing, helping both children who are being bullied and the bullies themselves to understand what's going on, the instincts that are behind that behaviour. That's one way that we've been helping people.
Yeah. There are so many issues, though, Peter, that we have at schools, in workplaces, across so many different areas in our lives, that these an understanding and application of this wisdom to find really productive, helpful solutions for anyone involved, whether or not that's like something like you said, bullying, or if it's, struggling with motivation at work, struggling with burnout, struggling with communicating with your peers, feelings of disconnect, loneliness, not connecting, even through COVID, and when people were isolated, understanding that and managing that in healthy ways. So it really impacts us, because we all feel these. There is not one person that doesn't experience these, and there's not one person that walks away without a greater understanding of how that applies to their own world. And then we can help, the journey along in small ways with, helping.
So you both run workshops for companies and schools and families and individuals. So how do they work? Do you all sit in a circle and talk, or do you have
depends, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've done lots of different things. I mean, it has changed recently with the new legislation. So with the Psychosocial Hazards Code of Practice that's come in, that's given us a real structure and a huge checklist basically for workplaces that they need to go through and do a psychosocial hazard audit. And then it's things like burnout, fatigue, remote work, working from home, all sorts of different poor leadership practices, poor workplace culture. And then once we've identified where the gaps are in a workplace, then we tailor our training to meet those gaps.
Yeah. So that's in the workplace. And then at schools, we have programs that are designed for specific year groups and also specific issues, and also staff cohort sort of training and leadership training as well. So again, sometimes it's lecture style, which we would prefer to have a much, much longer and smaller groups. That's not always possible given schools' time, pressure and things like that.
Ideally, we'd have a group of like 12 people in a room.
Our favourite days are when we can be with, a handful of people, up to 12, and just spend a few hours or a whole day.
Ideally, both of us at the same time. We like to be in the room together and run those experiences in a group facilitation.
And the feedback's always so special, and we get more, I think, than the people in the room. It's actually amazing.
I can imagine that some of the discussions that you have might leave the participants feeling a bit raw. What sort of tools do you give us to be able to interpret these things? I guess and understand those fluctuations in chemicals and everything, and how to process that, because even just some of the things that you've talked about today is I guess unleashed some thoughts in my head where I thought, oh right, okay, I understand that a bit better now, but where to from there?
We have our wellbeing planner that we encourage people to sort of start integrating these concepts into their own day-to-day lives and their own issues and histories and conditioning.
Yes.
And so just not to try to delve in and take on everything all at once, but just to pick one or two that mainly resonated with them and that they'd like to see some shift about, some changes and positive. And then because we have so many strategies, again, it's just, which applies to where in their life would make a good impact and greater impact. So, and then we have follow-up coaching if that would help, just to help integrate and understand. And
it's a gentle, I think of it like our life is like a huge ship and we're just gently nudging the bow in the right direction. So we're not asking people to make this radical change. I mean, if people want to, go for it. But what we're suggesting is each day you just gently nudge yourself in the right direction.
1%.
It's a very gradual process of change. Yeah. So I guess you help with, the way I'd put it is you give people a few tools to put in their toolbox so that when they need something, they pull out one of those tools and go, yes, I've got something to deal with what I'm feeling, how I'm feeling, or some sort of understanding. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. With that real invitation to just tune in when they feel themselves triggered or their state in any one moment. If it's a bit out, if it's great, if they're in a state of flow, that's fantastic. But if they're not, okay, what is it I need? I'm feeling really, I'm not motivated right now. What do I need? I need? So just, if I'm feeling a bit lonely, my oxytocin's low. What do I need? So it's very practical and empowering, and it just gives people a real sense of autonomy in their own lives. And
once you understand it, reasonably simple, I think.
It is.
Just
it is.
in
exactly right.
60 minutes that we've been chatting, I've had a few years on this planet, and I've learned so much just in 60 minutes. It's amazing. Thank you. Can either of you I'm going to put you on the spot here. Can either of you give me one of your standout examples where you've had a client that has just gone, aha. Or do you have those every day?
Well, some people quit their jobs at the end of the session. So
that's an aha moment.
I have a story I'd like to share that answers a previous question where you asked how do these all interrelate with each other, and it's not a client, it's actually my daughter. So she, when she was in year one, when she met Geniene's daughter, they became bus buddies, she succeeded in getting her stage 4 swimming certificate. So she's very proud, very good little swimmer in year one. Then in year 2, she went for stage 5 and she failed. Year 3 went for stage 5 and she failed. Year 4 went for stage 5 and she failed. So it's now year 5 and she's failed each year. And, it's the classic, they go every day for 2 weeks, swimming teacher helping them. So I went and spoke to the swimming teacher and I said, just so you know, she's failed this 3 times now. Is there anything I can do to help her getting her swimming certificate? And the swimming teacher said, oh, my gosh, I'm so sorry. We're actually only supposed to let them fail twice. And on the 3rd time, we just automatically give it to them. I was like, okay, well, hang on. I'm just going to ignore that. Just tell me, what does she need to learn? So the teacher told me. So I went home and I said, okay, Danny, we're going to practice. Here you go, do this. You sit on the chair. I'm going to help you with your feet. And and we watch videos of really good swimmers. And I was saying to her, I know you're going to get it this time. You're doing so well. Keep practicing. Don't stop. Didn't tell her she was automatically going to get it. Right. So that whole process we did for 2 weeks. Then she did the swimming test on the Thursday.
Right.
Friday morning, I drop her off and I'm about to rush off to work, and I thought, no, I'll just go in and just check that the swimming certificate's there. So there was a stool up the front of the classroom, with all the swimming certificates, and I'm going through, and this kid's past stage 5 and this kid's stage 7 and this kid's stage 11. And the very last certificate, it said, Danica Ellery, stage 5, failed.
Oh, dear.
And my daughter just looked at me and I just felt my guts dropping out. And she said, Mummy, my serotonin is dropping. And I looked at her and I said, yes, I can feel that.
So is mine.
Yeah. And everything in me, Peter, just wanted to take her home and sit on the couch and eat chocolate cookies with my arm around her watching TV, right? So I just wanted to give her oxytocin. But I was supposed to be going to work and I thought, you know what? I actually think she's got the skills to handle this. So I looked at her and I said, okay, so you're going to have low serotonin today, Danny, but you've still got oxytocin and you've still got dopamine. How are you going to get your oxytocin today? And she said, I'm going to go tell my teacher and I think my teacher will give me a hug. And then she said, I'm going to play with Lily, my best friend, at recess. I said, okay, good. And I said, how are you going to get your dopamine today? And she said, can't wait for silent reading after lunch because I want to read my book. And I can't wait to find out what's happening in the science experiment, which we're doing this afternoon.
Right.
And I said, okay, there you go. You've got dopamine and you've got oxytocin. And I turned around and walked away and left her with that sensation. And it was quite profound for me because even though I wanted to scoop her up in my arms and take her away, I actually knew she had it in her to deal with it, and she did. And at the end of the day, she was fine. So in that moment when she failed again, instead of saying, I'm useless, I'm a loser, she said, my serotonin is dropping. And for me, that was so significant. I just went, that's it. You can see what's happening.
That's just awesome.
Yeah. And she had the tools to self-regulate and to look after herself in the midst of that.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know how to follow that up. Look, we've had a wonderful chat today. If I wanted to find out more or get in contact with either of you at Wellbuilt Mind, what's the best way?
So our website, www.wellbuiltmind.com. Please look us up. There's a link there to just connect with us. Have you got anything else there?
No, email for
we have all of our contact details around that.
wellbuiltmind.com.
Yeah, follow us, look us up. We are more than happy to connect with anyone that would like to learn more about our services, and we're super passionate about what we do. So, get ready to come on a journey with us if you do.
It just sounds like it would be an amazing journey. Now, I ask most of my guests this question. Now, imagine you're talking to a 10-year-old self of you. What would you tell them?
Well, 10-year-old self for me was a big age. That was the year I was 10 when my dad passed away, and my mum was left with these 7 kids. I was the 5th of 7.
Wow.
And so big life experience. And I would say to her, you have nothing to fear, my darling. You have nothing to fear. Just keep going forth with courage and tuning in. You have an infinite resource and capacity within you to cope, and there is so much love around you. And actually, that's what I've always felt anyway. So it's like my old self. But even as a young 10-year-old, I think I knew that because Mum modelled and Dad, they showed and modelled to us a really way of being in the world that was very loving and to give a lot of self-compassion and care. So, so I don't think my message has changed a lot from even what I told my little 10-year-old self, actually, which is actually kind of nice to look back and sort of think, I knew that even back then. But there was certainly a lot more, as a 10-year-old would have a lot more sense of fear and being a little bit like, especially with that experience of losing Dad, confusion. And just that in the end, things take, there's a life is a journey, and just to, trust that journey and do your best.
That's wonderful, wonderful advice. Thanks, Geniene. Now, Charlotte, what would you advise a 10-year-old version of yourself?
Follow your heart, darling. Follow your heart. Don't listen to them. Don't worry about them. you are far wiser than you realise.
Short and sweet. Wonderful. Charlotte and